With a Friday deadline looming, lawmakers on Capitol Hill are scrambling to finalize a short-term bill to fund the government or face a government shutdown. NBC's Bree Jackson has the latest from D.C.
Lawmakers are racing to avoid another potential partial government shutdown. Republicans unveiling a short-term bill overnight.
It'll go to March 14, and that date was chosen because it coincides with the calendars of the House and Senate, and it makes sense for us to get the appropriations done. But our aim is to do it early in the year.
Among other things, the bill includes $100 billion for disaster relief funding for damage caused by Hurricanes Helene and Milton. There's also $10 billion in aid for farmers, something many Republicans support. But the overall size and scope of the measure is drawing pushback from some members of the GOP.
It's a total dumpster fire. I think it's garbage. This is what Washington, D.C. has done. This is why I ran for Congress to try to stop this.
Top Senate Republicans blame Democrats for the last-minute push.
We're dealing with this mess because the Democrats here in the Senate failed to take up what I think are the most basic responsibilities of our government, and that's to fund the military and obviously to spend wisely the taxpayer dollars.
Democrats say getting the measure through Congress before funding expires is a top priority.
We're getting closer to the December 20th deadline, so time is of the essence for Republicans to reach an agreement with us that we can act on quickly.
We are heading into the holidays, and the nation really needs a bipartisan package that will prevent a needless shutdown.
The bill also addresses rising concerns about recent drone sightings that have shut down U.S. airspace. One provision in the funding bill would reauthorize a program allowing federal agencies to coordinate and counter threats from drones. In Washington, Bree Jackson, NBC News.
Once again, that is Friday as the deadline to avoid that potential government shutdown, something that's becoming more and more common, and we're hearing about it a lot in the news nationally in the past year or so. So joining us now from the University of Oregon is Dr. Chandler James, Associate Professor of Political Science there at the university. First of all, Dr. James, good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, happy to be here.
Hey, thanks. Good to have you back. Now, feels like we're constantly talking about these government shutdowns. It gives a few months and then it's back on the docket again. Is this something that's been, has some precedent over the past, throughout the time of our government, or is this a newer phenomenon?
The threat of government shutdowns has not always been a part of our bargaining at the federal level. Mm-hmm. It really started in the 1990s, where congressional leaders started to use the threat of a government shutdown to compel the executive branch, the president, to make concessions on the budget.
So it's just a kind of a tool being used to get things to go your way.
It's a tool, but it's a very unwieldy tool because it uses the U.S. credit status as the kind of pawn in this game, which if the credit status of the United States drops, that means borrowing cost increase, and it could spell a lot of pain for the U.S.
Everyday Americans. Yeah, absolutely. Now, we could talk about national issues all day long. We did it last week. So this time I want to shift our focus to what's happening here in our state. You told me when you came last week that you spent some time in Salem recently as they prepare to enter with some new members and enter into a new legislative session. So first of all, what are some of the main issues facing our state currently that will be addressed in this upcoming session?
So some of the main issues, according to voters and politicians, is affordable housing and the homelessness issue. Mm-hmm. That is something that people repeatedly say is a major concern for them here in Oregon. Another thing is K through 12 education, mm-hmm. And education in general, which is a priority of the governor. And then finally, transportation is something that the legislative branch, trying to fix our roads and our highways and things mm-hmm. like that, is something that they're concerned, and I expect there to be a bill on moving forward.
Two of those issues you brought up are very important to my viewers. That's homelessness and education. Were you able to get any inkling while you were there talking with lawmakers about what you might be able to expect in those two fields as we go forward into 2025?
So the governor put out a budget that expands the amount of money for K through 12 education and for behavioral, mental health, and as well as affordable housing. And so that's going to be a major issue. The question is, how does the legislature fund this?
Yeah.
What measures do they take to make sure that there is the amount of money in the budget to meet the governor's priorities.
And some lofty goals at that. So
Right.
finding a good amount of money, I'm sure, to make sure that that gets done. Now, we talk about that government shutdown on a national level. We don't necessarily see that here at the state level as frequently. So what are some of the key differences you notice that people may be aware of that kind of shows the difference between what happens at the federal level and what happens right here in our backyard?
Right. So we have a federal constitutional republic. And that means that although the federal government is supreme, their laws, the federal laws are above state law. A lot of government services are actually implemented through the state.
Okay.
And so the state actually ends up being the closest touch for most people in terms of government. And so the state government actually does a lot of things: education, roads, transportation, a lot of services that people really rely on. That means that states have to implement things. It's more of a kind of administrative apparatus than the federal government, which primarily these days uses their largesse to compel people through tax incentives or money.
Sure. Now, one thing you sent as an idea of a question that I really enjoy, because I think this is one thing that our viewers care about a whole bunch, is that sometimes government seems like this big thing, hard to crack yourself into. How do you suggest that people watching at home might be able to get themselves involved in their politics here locally?
So I think this is maybe one of the great beauties of our style of government here in the United States. We have 50 states and a bunch of other jurisdictions that allow us actually, as citizens, to get a lot more connection with the government that oversees us or governs us. And so it's an opportunity in that sense to engage the government. And so you can call your local legislator and attend town hall meetings. Voting regularly is really important. You can volunteer, you can donate money, and you can participate in government in a variety of ways through participation in organizations like churches or nonprofit organizations. Finally, if you get fed up enough, you can volunteer for a campaign or run yourself.
Submit that name onto the ballot. How that must be that last straw. I'm done giving. I've donated. I've done this. It's time to get myself in the game.
Be the change that you want to see. But it is critically important that we do engage, because the more that we actually hold our elected leaders accountable through the day in and day out execution of politics, the more that they're going to do what we want them to do. And so it's not, I don't think, enough to vote every 2 years or every 4 years, but rather to hold them accountable through constant analysis and insistence, and sometimes when they do things that you don't like, respond.
Now, you did mention call, write an email, those sorts of things. Sometimes it feels like that might be like you send an email, may never be read. Do you, in your experience, do you notice that those sorts of things do result in some correspondence and some shifting in the behaviors of our elected officials?
So before I became a professor, I was actually a congressional staffer on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. And I was the person who was answering those phone calls.
You're very familiar.
And responding to the letters. And it, as a matter of fact, every single legislator, basically at the state level and federal level, has somebody, if not themselves, dedicated to reading your concerns, to hearing your concerns. And then politicians are very concerned about public opinion, and so they use this information as a part of, alongside other information to make their decision. And so if a lot of people call regarding a certain bill or express dismay or support for a particular thing, that demonstrates to the legislator that people actually care about this thing. And so in many respects, a letter can be a more powerful and influential move than voting.
Wow, absolutely. I just looked at my inbox, and I've got a few hundred from just this morning. So I need a Chandler James of my own to read through my emails and respond. Dr. James, thank you so much for joining us once again this morning. Look forward to having you here, like we said, every single Wednesday. Looking forward to break all this stuff down.
Hey, I love being here, so thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.